How's it going, YouTube? My name is Ninja7, your resident Mistweaver monk, and welcome back to another WoW healing video. Guys, today we're going to take a look at how some of the nerfs, the buffs, the tuning after Race to World First has affected us in the last week. Now, there's still not a lot of data available to us, but we're just going to look and see what we can uncover, how things have changed since all these tuning changes came into the game. So just a quick refresher, we're going to go through the list and talk about everything that hit, I believe, on the 5th. Yeah, December 5th. So it's been about a week since these nerfs, since these buffs hit. And let's see how they've kind of, messed with things. So if you remember, druids were doing insane damage in Mythic Plus. So a lot of their cat weaving abilities did get slightly tweaked, a little slap on the paw. So Ferocious Bite, Rip, their two big spenders did get slight nerfs, and then Rake and Shred, two of their good combo point generator cat weaving abilities, also got nerfed. Notably, no changes to their healing. No changes to their healing. So overall, just specifically some passive raid damage, maybe if you're going to take a cat weaving build into raid, but most specifically, it's a Mythic Plus tune. And then notably, Preservation Evoker did not get touched, even though they're arguably pretty middle of the pack in both forms of content, more toward the lower end, probably. They did not get any changes. No damage buffs, no healing buffs. Well, no damage buffs because their damage is actually kind of fine, but just no changes whatsoever. And then Mistweaver, us Mistweavers, did get the most heavy-handed changes. Now, the Mana Tea changes, reducing how much mana reduction that the Mana Tea buff applies to you. So if you drink 20 stacks of Mana Tea, the maximum amount of stacks for the next 20 seconds, now your spells cost 25% less instead of 50% less. So pretty heavy-handed on the mana is what we thought. Upwelling and Essence Font just flat out being nerfed. So Essence Font lost a lot of power because you saw how much healing it was doing, before the nerfs. So losing a lot of power off the top and just in general on Essence Font. And then Invigorating Mist healing being decreases the cleaving that their Vivifies do off all their Renewing Mist. So just cleave healing, seeing a big nerf, AoE healing, seeing a big nerf. And then Vivify actually did get buffed to kind of compensate. So the spot healing, the exact person that you're healing will receive slightly more healing, but everyone else who's going to be cleaved off of that does receive a lot less. And then Calming Coalescence, just how strong you can maximize your life cocoon. You can grow that shield to be a ton. Now it's, less. You can only double its size instead of 2.5 times its size. And then finally, Ancient Concordance did get a slight buff. So your blackout kicks have a higher chance to reset your Rising Sun kick. So overall, a lot of things that kind of just equated to not much of a change. You guys will see a lot of stuff that didn't really gut us, didn't really axe us as much as we thought. And then moving on, Holy Paladin, they didn't see any buffs. I would not call these buffs because they were not buffing how they were playing. However, it was kind of just kind of bringing up some buttons, kind of like how they did to Expel Harm, but to a much lesser extent with monks, but just making them want to play a playstyle where you're actually pressing your damage buttons again in a raid environment. So Crusader Strike got its mana reduced. So, you're swinging a sword, you're spending mana somehow, but it costs less mana, and then it does more damage. This also should, in theory, help their Mythic Plus, since they were struggling to keep up with damage, with your Disc Priest, with your Resto Druids, even with your Evokers, even with your Shamans. They were just doing a lot less damage in Mythic Plus. And then same with Hammer of Wrath. They're Execute, but when they go into their big wings form, they can press this, not an Execute. It lost a bunch of mana that it costs, and they also buffed how much damage it does. Now, notably, this one, there is a talent that can make this do healing. I'm pretty sure it cleaves on 5 people. If you throw your hammer, it does a bunch of damage, then it cleaves a little bit of its healing. So this one does also kind of equate to some amount of healing. But for the most part, this is not going to change their healing. So their throughput should not, in theory, shift too much on the raid healing charts. But their Mythic Plus viability should be adjusted slightly. And then next up, Disc Priest also got a slap on the wrist. 3% healing reduction and then 3% damage reduction. The damage reduction does also decrease their healing, since most of their healing does come from atonement. So this, it's kind of, this is the question mark heal. We were kind of, will this actually make much of a difference? Will it not? We will see once we start looking at the charts. And then Holy Priest, all healing increased by 4%. All the top healers are going to be shifting down in theory a little bit. They're going to shift up. This should help them bring bring them a bit more in line. I personally, I was saying that this was a very low number for how much they were underperforming on throughput charts. But seeing that they've nerfed all the top healers, this to me makes more sense now, thinking, oh, everyone's going to shift in this direction instead of just them. They should be buffed even more. Also, Burning Vehemence, I still don't know how to say that word, now causes Holy Fire to deal 75% of its initial damage instead of 60%, so buffing the damage, trying to give them some more passive damage in a raid environment and also give them more damage in a Mythic Plus environment. And then their 2 sets, the renews that they're getting are going to be extended, which would then buff their 4 set. So in theory, this would also equate to a lot more raid healing just from all the free procs that you should be getting, and then also just make them a little safer, a little better of a choice in a Mythic Plus environment, since they did struggle. Their main struggle was just that their healing profile did not really match well versus the damage profile in Mythic Plus environments. They just struggled to heal the party up and squeeze in damage global cooldowns because they were having so much trouble, dealing with the damage that was incoming because they don't have the right tools to deal with it. And then finally, Resto Shaman, they saw some of the weirdest buffs I've seen in a while. Healing Surge, which is their big spot cast heal, got a very slight mana adjustment. And from what I know, they're not even pressing this that much in any form of content. They're pressing the other one. I think the more efficient one, maybe I have those mixed up, but just a very slight mana tweak. And from what I've seen, watching my shaman and my raid group's mana bar and seeing some logs, they're struggling much more than this in a raid environment. They're putting out good numbers, you guys will see, but in order for them to be very viable, they need to bring more on top of what they're healing, kind of like Mistweaver monks. They have to either heal through the roof or bring more like a bunch of raid buffs like Mistweavers do. They don't have any raid buffs, so they need to perform exceptionally well in order to be, quote, meta. As much as a lot of us hate that term, it does apply here. And then on top of that, they did receive some buffs to their AoE damage, so Chain Lightning and then Acid Rain when they press Healing Rain. If you have Acid Rain talented, it'll damage everyone inside of it. So this, ideally, once again, Acid Rain is a good passive damage in a raid environment, but they were not really struggling in the raid damage for a healer. They were really struggling in Mythic Plus because just like Holy Priest, their healing profile, both of these guys are spot healers, like for the most part. That kind of is when they are strong in Mythic Plus, it's because spot healing is strong. And the problem with that is that all the other classes, like look at Mistweaver. Mistweaver is spot healing even harder than these guys. And once every 10 seconds, you can even line this up to where you can cast 2 instantly. Once every 10 seconds, Mistweavers can do it instantly. They can cast an instant Vivify that hits harder than a Flash Heal, or a Healing Surge, or I think a Healing Wave is what it's called. So these guys just struggle, and their cooldowns aren't the best for a Mythic Plus environment. So just like how Holy Priests are struggling to deal with the incoming damage, and then the damage globals that they're able to squeeze in aren't as effective as some of the other ones because they don't do any passive healing. Shamans are very similar. The only passive healing button that they have is Acid Rain. They summon a Healing Rain and it heals everyone inside of it while also doing damage. Other than that, like Lava Burst, Flame Shock, like all those things don't do any healing. They don't convert to any healing. So the damage globals they're squeezing in were just less effective. So ideally, this would push them up a bit, but from what we know about shamans, what they're lacking, what Holy Priests are lacking, these slight damage buffs shouldn't really push them up too high in terms of the meta. So that's kind of just a quick refresher. Let's go ahead and look at some stats. So here I have the last 2 weeks of the raid log. So this is what the graph looks like. And this is just throughput. So like what you won't see on this graph is like a Disc Priest bubble, or like the damage mitigation that Spirit Link Totem provides, or things like PI. You don't see that. Holy Priest giving everyone their defensives, giving mana back, things like that you just don't see on these logs. However, this is a good way to look at just how much healing a healing spec can do. So this is the last 2 weeks, so it will cover the week before the nerfs and this past week, the week after the nerfs. And then here we have one that is just this past week. Now, obviously it won't shift that much since this graph does include the same data this graph is kind of including as well. However, we can kind of see some trends. So I'm going to be clicking back and forth, so it might be like a little strobe light warning. But if you look here, watch Mistweaver, watch one at a time. So Mistweaver, you see this week versus last week, they did come down a little. It's not much. But like I said, this data is being double dipped into this data. So think of it as like it is a pretty nice little fall. They're still, very much at the top. But like I said earlier, they do lack a lot of external utility other than monk buffs, which if a raid group already has a brewmaster, then, Mistweavers don't provide that. They don't provide anything special other than their throughput. And then if you look at shamans, they have stayed the exact same. So yeah, like I said, in a raid environment, the only change that should affect their raid healing is that they now technically have a little bit more mana to work with, but it's like laughable. So shamans literally did not move at all. However, the rest of the group, the rest of the pack, this middle pack, Disc Priest, Resto Druid, Holy Paladin, Evoker, and even Holy Priest, they do move up. They do move up. So you see they all kind of just like bump up a little bit. Now, obviously, Disc Priest got nerfed, and the rest of them, except for Preservation Evoker, kind of got buffed. I mean, Holy Priest didn't. So Prez and Holy Paladin didn't see any real meaningful changes that convert into more healing. But the rest of them did see changes that do, mess with their healing. So ideally, you would see Holy Priest. Watch Holy Priest at the bottom. You would see them move up more than the rest of these guys, but they all kind of shifted all at once. Now, part of that, even the classes that got nerfed moved up. Watch Disc Priest. They do slightly bump up just as the rest of this group does. So this 4% healing buff, the changes to the tier set, show, since Holy Priest doesn't move that much, it kind of just shows that there is more fundamentally wrong with Holy Priest. There is just something that their kit is lacking, a number that could be adjusted other than just a flat 4% healing boost. And then the same could be said for Disc Priest. There is something that could be adjusted to actually truly nerf them other than just flat nerfing their damage, flat nerfing their healing by 3%. But one blanket statement that I'm kind of, inferring from this graph, seeing everyone except for Shaman and Monk kind of bump up in a similar fashion, it kind of just shows me it's kind of funny if you think of like a raid with a Mistweaver and then 3 of any other healers in it. The Mistweaver gets nerfed, so he's doing less healing, and then the other 3 do more healing because there's just more healing that they can kind of do. So that's probably the effect that we're seeing, is since Mistweaver kind of got knocked down a bit, everyone else kind of bumps up a bit. But for the most part, I do think these nerfs were slightly impactful for Disc Priest. I think they would have jumped even further up here with Shaman if they had not gotten nerfed. And then I think the Holy Priest buffs just were not as impactful as much as they would have hoped. Now that's raid. Overall, not like insane changes. Nothing really changed. You see the order is still the same. No one, skipped the other group. No one is kind of just like outshining insanely, other than like Mistweaver still doing a lot of throughput. But like I said, some of these other classes bring other attributes that are not shown on this graph. But let's go and look at Mythic Plus. So if we look at the leaderboards for Mythic Plus, you can kind of see a trend. It's very, it's weird to see it on this chart, but you start to see a lot of the same. So you see almost half of them are Disc Priests in the top 100. There are so many Disc Priests, but, kind of spattered between, or speckled between. There are a lot of Mistweaver monks, but a lot of Resto Druids. Even after the nerfs, this is where we thought they would come down a lot more because they're missing out on a lot of damage that they had last week. And then also Holy Paladin is starting to see a pretty sizable showing because they did get some damage buffs, but also they're still just a Mythic Plus powerhouse, even after all the 10.1.7 nerfs. But Holy Priest and Resto Shaman still, and also a little bit to an extent Preservation Evoker, are underrepresented. They're definitely underrepresented, especially Holy Priest and Resto Shaman. But yeah, you really start to see a lot of the same. Now, more importantly, at the very top, you do see a lot more Druids and Disc Priests. And it's really hard to kind of like draw some data from just looking at the top 100, but we do have a chart. Now, this is an all percentile, so let's go and look at the 75th percentile. So the 75th percentile, you can really see that there is a top 4 and there's a bottom 3. Now, this is pretty apparent. This is exactly what we saw from the top 100. But what do these top 4 do exceptionally well? What do these guys do better than the other 3 at the bottom? Well, I've kind of already said it in this video, but these 3 classes, preservation excluded, so Resto Shaman and Holy Priest, they struggle with the healing, the damage profiles coming into your group, so their healing profile is less good versus that damage. So they just struggle because the damage globals that they get to squeeze in between all the healing that they're doing are just less impactful. But you look at something like Disc Priest, something like Mistweaver Monk, when they're doing damage, it's also doing healing. So you're not sacrificing damage to do healing. You're not sacrificing healing to do damage. You're doing them both at the same time. And then the same can kind of be said for Resto Druid, because they're such a hot playstyle based class. How it's working is you're seeing Druids spread a bunch of hots before a pool, and then they'll press something like Flourish, and then they'll go into their cat form and just start spreading a bunch of dots that do a ton of damage. And then they can come back into Druid form once they've spread all their rakes. Once they've, if they're playing Thrash, they do a Thrash, they do a rip on the primary target, and then they can start healing if it needs to be done, spread more hots, refresh all those hots, and then go right back into cat form, do it all again. And so they are just doing a ton of damage. And then Preservation Evoker is the last one. Well, I guess Holy Paladin too. Preservation Evoker, from what I've noticed in my playtesting and what I've seen a lot and what I've heard a lot, honestly, is that they are just in every way a worse Mistweaver. They do a little bit more damage. If you look at, absolute damage charts, they have more potential output in terms of damage. But what it really comes down to is that Mistweavers will survive more incoming damage, and the time to top, the time to heal up your group is a lot less. So that's just more desirable of a class than something like Preservation Evoker. So that is just a clear differentiator, or you can see a clear distinction between those two green classes. And then also something that does hurt their viability is the viability of their counterpart. So it is just so much better for a group to have an Augmentation Evoker and then any other healer than a Pres Evoker, because if you have 2 Evokers in the same group, you're just not taking a very diverse group. You could take a Resto Druid that then takes a battle res that an Augmentation doesn't have. You could take Holy Paladin that provides all this mitigation to your group that Preservation just does not have, other than maybe Zephyr. So Preservation is really struggling because its opportunity cost is just taking a Preservation Evoker at the top end of keys just weakens the potential of that group. And that's just a fundamental issue, honestly, that a lot of people are saying is caused by Augmentation Evoker, and I would agree. However, for most of us, if you're pushing plus 25s or anything lower, all these classes, I should just say, all these classes can perform at a very similar level. Obviously, you can do more damage as a Resto Druid, and you'll probably have an easier time maybe with a Mistweaver Monk healing than something like a Holy Priest or a Resto Shaman, but they can all perform and do these keys exceptionally well. Obviously, that can be seen because they are all seen in the top 100. Look on screen. I'm pretty sure I have all 7 of them. No, we don't. But yeah, you can see all 7 of the classes can make it to the top 100 level. So don't let this be your absolute decision maker on which class you should play. But another piece of data that we're going to look at now, everyone loves a good tier list, and we are going to try to summarize all this data that we're looking at into a tier list at the end of this video, just because it's a fun visual representation, not meaning that it's like an absolute meta definer that the meta should be, absolute itself. But let me go ahead and switch over to this. This is what subcreation, which a lot of people don't like subcreation. It is data based, but the data is like not perfect. So it kind of just tries its best to make a tier list. So, and it always lands in an F, which is kind of funny. But this is what subcreation's data kind of shows. If you see here, it's based on the top, basically 16,000 runs ranging in difficulty from 20 to plus 29. You see here, there are 3 at the top. None are S tier, which I think is exactly right. I think in order for a class to be S tier, think Mistweaver before the nerfs in Raid, you would need a class to like need it to get nerfed immediately. We are not experiencing that at all. And then for the most part, there are 3 on the same tier. I personally would not put these all three on the same tier, but like I said, I would not put this one or whichever one up in the top in S. But we're not looking at sub creation, just for this tier list. I want to look at this right here. This is like the top compositions of Mythic Plus groups. So you can see like every variation of combination of a group, what is performing the best. You see here at the top, you see here Vengeance Demon Hunter, Disc Priest, Havoc Demon Hunter, Augmentation, and Demonology Warlock. Now, this is something that I don't see a lot of YouTubers, or I don't see any content creators really talking about. Let me move back to the top right. This is very important in determining what healer is meta. Now, why is this important? Well, if we look at this group, so this one down here with the Hunter, and we compare it to this group, the top group, although Disc Priest is technically the top of the top healer, it performs the best in the best comp, why is Resto Druid the best pick for the group with the Hunter? Well, if you look at what a Hunter doesn't have, it is replacing a Demonology Warlock here, and Warlocks have a B-Res, which is what Druids have too. So you look at this group up here, this group's great because it still has a B-Res. You can PI your big damage dealer, your big Demonology Warlock. You can augment everyone. You have the best tank. You have technically the best healer. So you're just doing a ton of damage and your group has everything. But if you were to take the best healer, the most meta healer, and just slot it into this comp where you now have a Beast Mastery Hunter instead of a Demonology Warlock, you're lacking something. You're lacking a B-Res, and that is huge. So that is also pretty big in determining which healer is meta, and that's also why I think Preservation Evoker is suffering a lot right now. That is one of the main reasons, because if you look here, almost all, if not all of these groups have an Augmentation Evoker. This is the first one that does not have one. So the meta compositions as a whole, you have to think not just what your healer provides, but it's kind of like a checklist. Does your group have this? Does it have this? So when you look at, the quote meta, you have to look at the top end because that meta trickles down. What the top people are preferring to take into the top end keys will trickle down to the lowest level, and that's why you see things more like enhanced. Like that's why you see these meta tier lists enhanced, because it's just this. It is just this data. You see Disc Priest works really well with the 3 best damage dealers. But, oh my gosh, Raid Shadow Legends, not sponsored. But then you look here, and like Mistweaver Monk doesn't have a B-Res. They don't have PI. But, you put it in this, you just slot it in for the Disc Priest, and it'll be fine, because you have a bunch of damage anyways. You don't really need PI technically, although it does help. And then this group can just pump damage. They have a B-Res anyway, so they have Lust because Augmentation has Lust. So this also, I can't say it enough, the meta DPS, the meta tanks, all of that really does play a big part in what healer can be meta or is considered meta. So now that we've taken all that data into consideration, I am doing this for my own personal fun, and you guys can follow along and make your own tier lists in the comment section below. But know that this is not absolute. I am not some, omniscient expert that knows everything and can see which healer is the best. I'm just saying from my experience, what I've seen in my keys, playing all of my alts, from my raid, guildies and everything, I would say this is what meta creation or sub creation had as the tier list. Once again, I would leave the S tier empty. I don't think any nerfs need to come in. I think for a Mythic Plus environment, you're going to see something like this. Maybe even like this and move these guys up. I don't think there are any F tier, even D tier healers. I do think Disc Priest is performing exceptionally well. Now, is Resto Druid performing quite at that level? I don't think so. They are pretty, neck and neck, but I just see more, where is it? I just see more Disc Priest performing well. So although that is partly due to them being more popular, if you look here, Disc Priests have more parses. I do see a lot of where is it? I do see a lot of Resto Druids also performing. So I'm going to put them here just because they're a less representation, but a very similar outcome and where they land on the top 100. Now, Holy Paladins did kind of sneak in. A lot of their worry was that they just don't do enough damage, but you're still seeing them perform very well on the top 100 as well. And then same with Mistweavers. We knew they'd be strong, but since they do lack PI, which is a big top performer, what can really push your DPS to insane levels, and they're doing less damage than Disc Priest, you will see them just be a worse version of Disc Priest, you know, that B-resless class. And then for Resto Shaman and Preservation Evoker, they struggle a lot in similar ways, and they also don't bring a lot to a group in terms of Battle Lust. Usually when you see a Resto Shaman or a Preservation Evoker get accepted to a group, it's because they were specifically listing Need Healer Lust or Need Lust Healer. Nowadays, Augmentation Evoker kind of just makes these two classes, you know, not bring anything special to the group. And then Holy Priest is just a worse version of Disc Priest in both forms of content right now. So this is where I would land them in a Mythic Plus tier list. And as far as a raid tier list, that's a lot harder. I do think it's a lot closer. I think a raid tier list would look something like this. I think Disc Priest, Mistweaver are performing exceptionally well. Once again, bringing a lot of damage, bringing a lot of versatility in how they can play. And then the rest of these classes are just, you know, performing very well, pretty evenly. You know, I would say Shamans, although they're performing very well on throughput, they do just bring less to a raid environment than these two guys. So this is where I would land them on a raid tier list. And then as far as an overall tier list is concerned, I guess we could drop these guys down. And I think this is pretty safe. Maybe even this. They're basically what I think for a tier list. I think they're all very close. You know, in other seasons, you'll see classes like take up most of the tier list, but I really do think everyone's pretty close. And you can have a great time in any form of content on any healer other than probably these three. I do think these three will probably have a sore spot. Maybe Shamans don't enjoy running out of mana in raid, don't enjoy doing a lot less damage than they're used to in Mythic Plus. And then Holy Priests don't like being at the bottom of charts in raid, although they're providing, I promise you guys, you are very loved and needed by us other healers by how much healing or mana and healing you provide to us. But yeah, I do think that you can have a great time on any healer, but I would expect more gripes out of these guys, rightfully so. They fundamentally just feel like they're lacking something. But guys, that's gonna do it for this video. Look, I love this style video, and I know it's very like controversial is not the right word, but polarizing. I know a lot of people hate this style video. A lot of people love this style video, but I made it because I enjoy making this style video. So I hope that you guys enjoyed watching it because I had a ton of fun making it. Guys, my name's ElbenNinja7. Hopefully your favorite WoW healing content creator. I love doing this. I love making videos. No matter how stupid or no matter how much I just stare at this graph. I've stared at this graph for like the past 3 hours trying to gather as much as I can for this video. But guys, hopefully you enjoyed it. I'll see you guys in the next video. Oh, before we leave, I got to give a special shout out to the Patreon. Now, the Patreons are the reason why this channel exists, guys. I would not be able to do it without them. So huge thanks to these guys on screen. If your name is on screen, you are the reason this channel exists. Thank you so much for all the support. And if you want to see your name alongside these guys, check out the link down in the description below where you can see all the different tiers that you can choose to support. Or if you don't like Patreon, if you aren't a big Patreon guy, then just click the like button, click subscribe, make sure that you're subscribed because those also help my channel in this video just as much, and they're very much appreciated. So thank you guys so much for doing all those sellout things. But guys, my name is ElbenNinja7. I really appreciate you for watching this video instead of all the other videos. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, take care.